So now that we know how to render an array of JSX elements, let's try to get some data from an API and see how we can use that data in our application. So for that, I'm going to use this pexels.com API, and it's pexels.com/API. That's where I am. I'm going to have to start by registering for an account. So I'll just fill this information and get back in a second. So as you can see, I'm going to have to confirm my email, which I'm going to do off screen. All right, so now that I took care of that, let me just refresh this. And we're going to start this project. And then you should get your API key. So I'm going to copy that and go to documentation. Now, if I scroll down here, we'll hopefully get some information here, how we're going to use this API key specifically. So that will be probably under this section on the left. Here we are. And it gives you an example of a call. So basically, we need to send this headers with this API key in it. So now I have my API key for this. Now it's probably best to have your API key used on a server and then return the results on your server so you can control who can use your API key. That being said, I'm going to go to my project here. With that API key copied, I will just go ahead and create a new component here. I'll call this gallery. I'm going to add the code to this gallery component in a second. Before I do so, I'm going to add a new file here on the top level. And I'm going to call it API key.js and drag it over here. So all I'm going to do in this file, I'm just going to create a constant. And I'm going to export. Actually, let's just export it right here. And I'll just paste my API key within this quotations. So now we have our API key in this API key variable. So now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and create some basic starting point. And the way we want to think about this is when we get some results from that API as like list of posts or whatever this is going to be, we want to basically render that here in our return. But initially, when our page loads, we wouldn't have that information yet. So we need to always think that initially, this is going to be an empty list. So let's create that empty list. So for that, I'm going to add useState. And we'll use useState, and by default, it will be an empty array. And we'll map through that empty array in our return statement. Now, because that empty array doesn't have anything at the moment, it won't really do any of this code because this is going to be an empty list, nothing to loop through. So this code at the moment is just not going to run. So maybe we'll add an H1 and we'll just say gallery for now. We want to basically call that API, get some results, and using those results, we want to populate this list here. And we want that to happen when our page loads. And for that, we're going to use useEffect. And useEffect is going to have a function that's going to run as our first argument. And as a second argument, we pass a list of dependencies when this function should run. And by default, if you pass an empty array, that means that function will run only on page load. So if you want something similar to document on DOM content loaded event, this would be it. So now I'm going to go here, and anything that's going to happen on our page load is going to happen within this use effect. So now what we're going to do on page load, we're going to call that API, and we'll use fetch API from JavaScript. And let's just go check out fetch API documentation. Here we are on Mozilla. If I scroll down, let's just find an example. So they have some of these bad examples. That's actually a good example for us. So I'm just going to copy that, and we'll just fix it really quickly here. So just go here. Actually, let's get rid of this and paste it here. And we're going to change this to content type, so it's not a bad example. And we'll go and take a look what their request is supposed to look like on their documentation. And here's their API documentation. See, this is our, for example, endpoint. So I'm going to copy that for now and go ahead and paste it here. And as our headers, we need to do this. So the first part of it is going to be this. Let's get rid of this for now. And the value for that here is going to be our actual key. And I'm going to get that API key from this file where I stored it. So I'll just import it. I didn't do a default export, so I'm going to have to import it like this. So from the current folder where I am in components, I'm going to go one level up. Should be import. Okay, so now we should get some autocomplete because it's correct. And I'm going to go to that API key file, and I'm going to that API key file, and I'm exporting that variable that is API key. So I'm basically just going to use that over here. Here we go. So now we have this headers. We're passing to our fetch API. Now fetch API is going to return a promise because it's going to take time for this to go get this information. So for that reason, I'm going to go here and convert this function to an async function. And now because this function that we called is an async function, we should be able to go here and do a wait to wait for that information to come back. And I'm going to say const API response equals this. So for right now, it says people. I'm going to go to the next line here. And for the time being, let's just try to console log that API response and see what we get. So I'm going to save this. Now, in order for this gallery component to load, we need to use it someplace. And for that, I'm going to go to my app.js and create another route here and call this gallery. And we'll use that gallery component, which we're going to have to import on top here. So I'm going to save this and let's just run this and open this in our browser. And I want to go to that gallery page. We probably should add a link to our navigation so it's easier to do so. So I'll go to my nav and add a link to that gallery. And hopefully I did change this in my route. Looks like I did. Okay, good. So I'm going to go back. Here we are. We have gallery. I'm going to click on that. And here's that component. Now let's open our console and see what we get. See, we got some sort of response and it says status is okay. So let's try to look into this and see what we have. So right now the body of this is a readable string, as you can see. Now let's just take this and convert it to a normal JSON at this point. So I'm going to go back to this after we made this call right here. We'll say const API response JSON equals, and we'll take that API response and run this JSON method on this. And this is also a promise, so we're going to use a wait on this as well. So we're going to wait for this to happen, then we're going to wait for this to happen, and then we're going to console log this. So I'm going to save that, go back, and you can see it reloaded for me automatically. And you can also see that I got this object. And if I open this, it says, this is my next page, this is page 1, and I got an array of photos, which seems to be 15 of them. So if I go to photos, that should be an array of objects, as you can see, and then inside of it, we have all of this information. So I'm going to just narrow down to just those photos so we can only work with that. So I'll just go ahead and add another variable here. And we'll take that API response JSON and get photos out of it. So at this point, if I take a look at those photos, save it, we go back and take a look, it should be just that array of photos. And if I open that array, I have an array of objects, and it gives us all this information: alt, the height, photographer, photographer's URL, actual source images of different sizes apparently that we can use. We have the URL to the actual source photo right here, and so on. And for each one, we're going to have all of this information. Now, what I want to put all of this in my state variable. So if you remember, we created this variable gallery results, and that's an empty array. So at this point, I basically just want to make those results whatever I get back here, these photos. And to do that, we're going to use this function that we use to modify it. So that's our set gallery results. And I don't want to do anything from the old results. I'm just going to say these are going to be my results, these photos. I will actually just make a copy of it just to make sure we're basically sending a new object. So at this point, I should hopefully have my gallery results stored. Actually, let's keep this console log here. So if I go back, it says gallery results.map is not a function. Okay, I made a mistake someplace. Let's go back. Oh, this is an array. It's not an object, which is technically an object, but we need to use array syntax. Here we go. Let's fix that, save it, go back, and now we got this. So it's our array, basically, no more errors. So now we want to load that on the page, right? So now we should be able to go within each element in this array using that map function down here. When I map, I get each post, and my each post will be one of these objects. And within that object, we have all of these different pieces. So for example, if we wanted to get photographer, that would be our object name dot photographer. So for example, if I go here and we're going to return some sort of JSX, so I'll start with returning some sort of li, I guess. That would make sense since this is going to be a list of things. And in this list, for now, I'll just add a div of some sort. And within that div, I'll try to just output that photographer, which is their name. So it's going to be post dot and the part we want to access, which is this post is this variable name. So if you name this something else, this is going to be that same thing. And dot photographer is the part of that object. So if I save this, we go back and take a look. See, we get a list of all of those photographers down here, just like that. So we get that key error that we get when we get a list of some sort. Now we're going to check to see if there is some sort of unique ID within that array that we can use. It seems like we do. There is a unique ID here, which is called ID. So we'll just use that as our unique ID. Now, if you didn't have one, you could use the I from the map, but I do have it. So what I'll do, I'll go to, again, parent element, which in this case is li, and add a key. And as a key, we're going to use the ID coming from that post. So if I save this, hopefully that error will disappear, and we will see that we get this list. Now, currently, the way we do this API call, we do this search for people. That should be essentially similar to going to their website and searching people here. So let's say I want to switch this to search for a model or something. Let's go and switch that. So what I would do, I would go and change this to model. And instead of hard coding this in our search term, let's actually create a variable. So for now, we'll just say that is going to always stay the same. And then we'll use that variable here. So I'll just do old-fashioned way plus this. So again, this should basically now return similar results, except that names are probably going to change because now we're searching something else. So our results are going to change a little bit. So if I go back and take a look, see, we get this. So now let's start using some of these other parts of this array to basically just create our results. So maybe we can use this alt tag as a description, and then we'll use some source photo. So basically at this point, we're going to just build our HTML here within this list the way we want that to look. That will be that div that's going to show who the photographer is. We should probably put these in their own tags, but right now this is not about HTML or CSS. It's just about getting this to display our results. So this is going to be this alt, which is this description of the picture. We'll probably want to load the picture itself. So for that, we'll use some sort of image tag, and we'll have some sort of source for that image. Let's just put this on its own line. And here we need to output the actual picture itself. Let's actually just do this so we can have a variable. Now let's go grab the URL for the picture. So I'll go back and we'll hopefully find that here. So that's going to come from this src portion. And see, inside of that src, we have all these different options. Landscape, we have large 2 times, we have medium, we have original, we have small, all those different sizes. So maybe let's start with this medium. So that's going to be from our object. We're going to have to go to src. Within that src, we're going to have to go to medium. So it's going to be post.src.medium. So I'm going to save that. Let's just go back and take a look. And as you can see, we got photographer, description, we got the photo itself. And then we have all the photos like this. Maybe let's add photographer URL to this, and that's all I'm going to use for now. This is just going to output the text of the link, which is not going to be great. We probably want this to be an actual link. So for that, we're going to use an A tag. So instead of having this, I'm going to create an A tag. That A tag is going to have our href. And here we're going to just pass that same URL. And here we're going to say what we want the actual text to say. We'll just say visit now or something. Let's also add target blank so it opens in a new browser window like this. So we'll save this, go back, take a look. So see now we have this visit now. If I click on this, that should go to that profile of that photographer. So at this point now we can work with basically HTML and CSS and make sure we style this in a way that works for our application. And currently we're on this global styles. So I want to start using a little bit of Sass at this point. So I'll go to the CSS folder and add a global Sass file for global styles. We will probably at some point talk about localizing our styles to that particular component, but right now we'll just do some global styles. Now, since these are going to be global, I want to basically import it for the whole application. So I'll just go here and import those styles here. So that's from the current folder. We're going to have to go to our CSS folder, and then we're going to link to that file called styles.scss, which is that Sass file. So it's going to take a little bit for this to go download anything it needs to basically compile Sass, which is fine. And in the meantime, we can go to our gallery and do a little bit of styling. I'm not going to go too much in depth with styling in this because it's more about getting the data, which we, by the way, already did. So I'll just go and add a class to this li. And we'll just call this gallery result. Since this is getting too long here, let's actually just store this whole map results in a separate variable on top and then render it here. So I'm just going to cut it out of here, go on top here, and we'll create a variable. And simply just take that variable and output it over here. So the reason I'm doing this is that it's now going to be easier for me if I need to, for example, add an unordered list tag to wrap all of these. It's a lot easier for me to actually see visually what's happening here. At some point, we may want to actually transfer this entire li to be its own component. So now we should have a UL, and it renders this li, and it has this class gallery result. And before we style any of this, let's just do a class, and that will be gallery list. This is the wrapper unordered list around all of these LIs. So now let's go and quickly style these two classes in our Sass file. So first, we'll just make sure that we remove any existing margins and paddings. And maybe also just set our box sizing to be border box. Then as our gallery list, we'll just make it display flex. So we can basically create columns inside of this. We'll do list style none to remove the regular list dots and all that weird stuff. So let's also add like flex wrap and do this. So at this point, it should basically convert all of these results as a column. So let's just add a border here so we can see it. I want to make sure I also add a rule for my images to sit within the container they're in. And now let's go here for our results and try to use something like flex. And if we do 1, that should basically proportionally size all the child elements, which will look weird, but it should work. So you can see all those results I get. As long as it can fit here, it's going to squish them like so. Now I probably want to have X number of results per line. Let's actually change this to 100% so that I'm not zoomed in so much. So now it can actually fit all of them on a single line, as you can see. So I probably want to display maybe like 3 or 4 or however many posts per line. So for that reason, let's go back. Let's try to change this to 33.33%. So if I go here, you'll see that, this is like 33%. So basically it's 3 pictures or 3 posts per line. Maybe you want 4, then you can switch this to say 25%. There we are. So now if we wanted to push this content in a little bit, we can add some padding to this. So now everything is pushed in a little bit, as you can see. And we can basically just continue styling this as you would. But overall, we have this working the way it should. So the only thing I probably want to change in this, I want to kind of have my pictures to go like landscape for all of this. So I want to go to their API and see if we can modify that API call to only get landscape pictures. So let's go back to their API and take a look. So where is their search? See, search for photos. Here, there's this orientation. Let's try to see if there's an example of that. See, we can do landscape. Is there an example of how that works? I can't see it, but I'm going to assume it's going to be like one of these parameters. So we'll just say orientation landscape. Let's see what happens. So we'll go back to here where we actually make that API call. And after this, we'll add orientation is landscape, and we'll do ampersand to do our second parameter, which is basically going to be whatever we had before. Let's try to save this, go back and take a look. So you can see now we're looking at landscape pictures only coming from that API. So mainly the things I want you to concentrate on. Always remember that by default, we're not going to have any results at all. So that's why originally we want to set an empty array of results. And then once we get those results, we will populate them using that set function. And then once we get those results, if we just map through those results, we'll get our list. And because it just automatically renders, it should just work. And that should do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.